but he just moved, right? Oh, gosh.
The mic on the computer?
Hang on.
I can hear you.
Yeah, I know. Give me a sec. I'm just going to rejoin.
Yeah, well, I mean, stuff that's in barrel now, we can stay in barrel, obviously, so it's more than stuff that's
I'm so sorry.
Okay, no worries. So you want to mux the channels together,
Yep.
and in my memory of thinking about that particular problem, what happened is I found that there's like you still end up needing to tag the action with metadata of where their target is and where their source is.
You mean, well, I've got a Mux ID, so I can Mux it that way.
Right, but like because there's a lot of asynchronous things coming and going that need to be matched, you still need to know who you're talking to and like what message you're trying to correlate back to when it's coming back from them.
Yep, that
So
seems easy to do.
yeah, so like I found that there was like by mux you basically mean you're sticking the actions on one common queue, right?
Yes, but they're tagged with a Mux ID. Man, I cannot get my headphones to work on this computer.
Oh, I'm coming through the computer, eh?
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to. Got like two Bluetooth headphones. None of them.
Please tell them where's your exactly that bag at the moment.
Ah, that's interesting and embarrassing at the same time. Man, 2022. Bluetooth doesn't work.
Bluetooth is trash, man.
Yeah, but look, I mean, if you don't have anything else.
I have the cord.
I'm gonna just go back to my phone. Sorry. Okay. So I got a Max ID. I got the whole reason I'm trying to do this is I want to avoid the whole mechanism that does buffering of things, because I have to still when the covenant says I am pending, like I am awaiting something, all the incoming actions, I still need to sort of gobble them up or process them through in order to, some of them might be a system action that can have an impact on that pending covenant, like reset, upgrade, add new channel, delete channel, add permission. Right, and so I can avoid having that buffering mechanic if I mux the channels, so that I have by default, there's like the default channel, there's also a system channel, and all I do is just give them a mux ID, and then I can marshal the actions in and out depending. And I guess the question I'm asking is, well, it's easy to do it in the general case where I just like, you can have multiple aliases pointing at the same chain ID, and I will, depending on the alias you used to send your action to it, I'll translate that to a different mux ID, and it will have a different impact on how that chain receives it when it gets it, but I'm sort of a bit fuzzy on exactly why I might want that. Yep. Right. Yes, always. Yeah. I see. That is a different way to do it. So you, instead of muxing, you process every action. You process every action, and then only if it's a covenant action did you put it on the covenant queue. So you treat it all as one queue and then demux. In effect, demux between either system or covenant. Yeah. One action from this queue, because it needs to be drain. It needs to be take one, because I think it's important to be able to stop your block arbitrarily. Like as a programmer, I'm like, I want to stop the block right now. So that means that I need to allow queued up actions to still be there next time the block moves. Well, the reason, yeah, so the mechanism I'm trying to leverage now is that now that using IPLD links for items, if your that data structure doesn't deal with malleability well, but it deals with vast permanence. Like, so for example, the model I have makes the pool be actual, as you make the pool eventually becomes the next block after it's been processed, rather than it being sort of something transient that gets discarded, right? Because in a database, it's cheap to throw things away, but in IPLD land, it's a lot more expensive to make a piece of data. So you need to leverage your savings on the fact that you never need to alter it. And if during the pooling phase, everyone knew that that was eventually going to be a block, they can synchronize it early so that you can decrease you can get your wins back. What you lost in hashing, you can get it back on sync time. So that's why I'm trying to make things as permanent as possible. And I've got a method that does that for the queues, because it treats when an interpulse comes in, it basically holds the next stack of actions that the sending chain sends it, and I just hold them as interpulses. So you can stack it super high, and it's all just a linked list of like, this was the precedent pulse, the hash of the precedent pulse. So that's an actual blockchain as opposed to the pulse tree that we have now. But it just means that I don't want to have to create a new data structure to represent those actions when I already have it. I just want to store a counter where I'm up to here in this particular pulse. So if the music stopped, that's where I'm at, and I'll carry on next time. They all, in the pool, they get attached to their appropriate channel by a chain ID, and then the next time the engine executes, it just picks from whichever channel it is chosen to drain first, and it just pulls them all down. Yeah, because of that's taking advantage of the IPLD structure, because it came envelope. I don't need to break it apart. Sorry?
Yeah.
The outbound messages are always grouped by chain ID. So that was the piece I was getting at. Like, that gets dissolved in the IPLB model. They're not strictly speaking in an envelope. It's just that the permissioning scheme allows me to walk as a foreign chain. I can walk that block up to get to the messages addressed to my chain ID. That's the difference. It doesn't technically exist anymore. It's not really an envelope. It's a sub DAG of the pulse DAG that made it, and I attach it to the recipient chain DAG. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's the thing that I was talking about yesterday, is that I think I can vaguely see how to make that a true state machine. And that's the piece that does all the marshalling and chooses which channel, and then pulls out system actions versus covenant actions, and determines if the chain flipped into pending, all those kinds of things. Right. An array. So I'm making the actions appear as an array, and what I've done now is that I'm giving every action a counter. So you count from 0, and that's your internal representation of the action. Internally and externally, that number is used to reference to the action. Yes and no. It's sort of implicit because the way the actions get transmitted is they are stored as an array. The counter simply tells you what is the sum of all the lengths of the arrays that have come before this one in this block. And that's so you have to calculate it, and then you're like, this is the action ID. And it lets me marry up responses. And I'm also tracking promises on both sides. So promises that I said I was going to get back to later, and promises that I was told I'm going to get later. That using IPLD, that's easy to make it a shared piece of information. And it's useful because I can throw an exception when the covenant tries to promise twice, or when it tries to resolve multiple times, or when it tries to resolve something it hasn't promised before and it's out of sequence, and all those kinds of things that just sort of force order within the system. I think you just talked me out of it. There's really no point in that sense of treating, as a programmer, if I've got children in the chain, and I make a link to one of those children, I can send my actions to different aliases now. I can send it to the child alias or the link alias. It's going to get to the same chain ID. Chain ID. It's a chain. Yeah. It's a universally unique ID. That's kind of it. Yeah. Internally. Yeah. You give it a name. So my question was that, is there any utility in being able to think of, like, to be able to de-escalate my emissions and talk to a child as though it's a downlink, as opposed to talking to it as a child where I have absolute authority over it? That's really all I'm wondering. Chains are.
I call it rules, say, Chris. I call it rules.
So.
Vaccine mandates and rules.
In.
What's that? I call it rules. The vaccine mandates are rules.
Inside the network object, I assign every channel gets an ID internally.
Who was that doing that? Was that for the series or something? Or?
I didn't want to deal with the nightmare of when you rename something. Like, I need a stable ID, because when you rename it internally, I need to keep track of everything. And it can't be a chain ID because internally you are allowed to make a channel before you've resolved it. So. Right. Yeah, the system view and the program view, and I'm mapped between those except in the case where if you are a programmer, if you use the spec, I can give you back the channel ID plus the action counter, and you'll be able to unambiguously receive a reply to that by the channel ID plus action ID that comes back. You know what I mean? It's like a sort of, it just makes it so much easier for me to marry up all those things internally, particularly when I may not know them in advance or even at the time when they got asked for. So I can communicate back to the programmer, hey, you've got this channel ID, this action ID, that's what you just made. And I can honor that for everything, and I handle the matching.
Yes, but when you say them, you're thinking, as a government does, it's one homogenous kind of group.
Yeah, I thought you didn't, but actually I strongly believe you do. Why did you think you don't need it?
Sure, not giving money.
Right. Okay, so I think that has a fault. And the fault is when you rename the alias, but there's a delay in the chain on the other side. Oh, I guess that could work. So you just you keep track of what alias maps and what chain ID in real time. Right. Yeah.
Triple the number of ICU beds. Extra ranks. What's the next 2 weeks like? My point is, though, we would have
Yeah, right? Like, so you're saying that you can have any string you like as an alias so long as it doesn't match the records of the chain ID.
Everyone else, I know what people are anywhere upset, but I sort of, they're on the front side, they start taking money or something.
Yeah, you can't miss during traffic because it is helpful to tell the author what their program ID is, because I'm going to send in replies that are addressed to that. And so if they mess around with it, it's sort of like it's a lot of bookkeeping in a way, or it feels like it's bookkeeping I can avoid doing. Because it's also for keeping, they have to understand as well, right? Whereas if I'm just like, look, it's just an ID. Every time you make a new channel, the ID goes up. The ID is private to this chain. It's only for the system communicating with the covenant. It's the only purpose of it. Yeah.
I think it's going to be accelerated.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Okay, all right. I think what you've convinced me is that there's actually no point to have more than 2 channels between each chain, a system level channel and a covenant level channel, and that if I just demux between those 2, then I can avoid buffering all the actions that need to be processed later when I'm in pending mode. Because I can just set a marker that says this chain went into pending mode at this point in processing its covenant actions, and then system actions continue to flow. But I just restart the covenant action processing once the pending flag is loaded.
But yeah.
Yes, they're always referenced by their content. They're always referenced by hash because, so there's a stage that is planning before you begin block making where you resolve all the tags that you need to and make sure that everything's available synchronously once you get block actions. And those actions are checked using that method, but they can be checked out of off thread because they can be checked as part of the pooling process, not part of the blocking process. So they get read, they get attached in this structure that is basically it's a DAG with some multiple references to the same content. So it's not a tree, it's actually probably a graph. It's still directed, it's still acyclic. But it just means that transmitting an action to another chain, it is the same as storing it, and then receiving an action from another chain is the same as reading it. Yeah, they are.
So there's that. It's something a bit true. It's something really, I suppose what it is when you use that as a shoot. It's in the latest website. Yeah.
Well, there's a loopback channel.
It was sort of a photo.
Sorry.
Yeah. Of course, it's great. It's just consistent with the local
Yeah. And so that's, I mean, are you talking about like the outbound channels when the covenant wants to send stuff to something? that process of creating those outbound actions they get written in a format that can be read in from the other channels. Has to. Inbound in the IPLD system is a pointer to the hash of the chain that has the messages parked in it for you. And the goal is the permission system would only allow you to read the valid path that goes to your action on it. And then once you've read it, it's sort of mounted or attached as part of the DAG within your next block. So within the pool DAG is the DAG that will eventually be processed and then signed as being the next block. And what I like about that is that I can receive a whopping amount of interpulse communications into the pool. I don't have to process them, but I can sign that the pool is now this big. And I can just sort of, chunk my way through it over time. I don't have to park it in the pool where it might be manipulated or lost due to system failures. In my block, I can say this is with assertion. This is all the messages that I'm aware of. I just haven't got to them yet. Yeah, that's the only place. That's the only place. It's so nice.
Something slowed down by
I'm not sure I fully understand what you mean when you say up and down. What is up? So, like, if I change my own config, is that considered? Like, if I want to specify, yep, that's up. And then side, and so down is from system going into the covenant. Right? So in this model, I have the down channel is I plucked something off of one of the inbound chain channels, and I've now sent it down to the covenant. Is that what we're talking about? Okay, and then when you send up, I receive it and it's addressed to one of the side channels, or to myself, or to the PS channel.
This new thing build this huge. So
ups.
in the subway station, hundreds of thousands of people touring off to motor routes. Livelihoods.
Yeah, I got that.
Strikes as well.
Right. So that's what the PS channel looks like. Yeah. Anything not in chainland can only come and go via the PS channel.
Well, maybe I'll start eating that. Go back to a peanut slabs again.
So pool is a much more ordered concept in in this structure.
I've got a new dock. I've got a new dock.
No, it's like a piece of another chain.
You told me it's the weight. Oh yeah. I can see it.
Yep, yep.
You did tell me that. Too much of the idiot size of one can be granted. Probably can't see risk of a life. I thought it
Well, the loopback channel that I made, as you put it in, it like flips it and just sends it back down to you, so it was a channel.
I will start by the box.
Yeah, it is. It's a nightmare, but it's sort of. Yeah, the most confusing test case for the Mobius strip was to receive an external action, send a loopback action, and then send another loopback action that you then awaited on in order to get back to this other thing. And so it's like awaiting on yourself still needed to be valid, plus you had all these actions behind it that you'd also loaded up that needed to be valid too. I was like, man, that's...
So tell him to stop smoking. I get 69 that's the one that's
The covenant being treated as like a very hostile foreign thing. Yeah, absolutely. They're not, man. They're really not. They're your friends because you passed the... During pooling. Pooling is when the things you receive are untrusted. But once they've been attached to your future block via the pooling process, you can trust them absolutely. They have passed all the checks. Yeah, it's sort of squeezed it all out, and it's just dealing with you in a protocol that you both understand. You're keeping a watch on them for sure, but at least you don't have to, once you've performed those checks, you no longer have to wrangle what they're saying into your language. So that's what interblocks were. I managed to at least get rid of envelopes as a thing and just use interblocks as envelopes. But with IPFS, it's like a leap further. It's architecturally further because now it's I don't even know how to describe it. But yeah. No. Yeah. And so all the operations that you had to do are still required. Like if you get a signal, hey, this is intervals being read, you still have to load it, check it before you attach it. But it feels so much simpler to think about as just assembling things rather than sending things.
I don't want to scare you or anything. He's always punching him out of the shots. Got down the sugar man. Well, this year too, I'm going to be doing my bike. I'm going to give my bike a service this weekend. Right, that's me done, I think.
Thanks, yeah, man. Yeah, that's all. One at a time. So one at a time. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So I'll only I'll only distinguish between system and covenant, and no matter which alias you use to talk to the foreign chain, it's going to come out as the same. You are either a system action or a covenant action, and I'm not gonna mux any further than that. Yep. It is a horrible user. It gets enveloped. The object I used for enveloping it is called a reduction, and that is the message that is sent back from the isolation container once it has exhausted the covenant, either from time or because it went pending or because it finished its execution. And it sends you back that envelope as the results of the computation, and then you begin to process it. But it has to happen in isolated. Sorry, you think there's a fairly... Right. Yes. Yep. 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 The block is the envelope for what the covenant said. And it's an envelope that has multiple addresses, like it's got little tear off bits down the bottom for different addresses, but yeah, it's the envelope. Sweet. All right. Well, sorry. Would love to. Yeah. So, do you want to know how the broadcast signal or the announce gets spread, or just from the point that you've been told that there's a new action, there's a new set of actions for you? Right. So you've somehow been told that this chain that you've been communicating with has a new transmission that it wants to send you. That transmission can be either requests that they want to make to you or replies to things that you made to it. There you are given the chain ID of that chain, and that's all. You using IPFS, you fetch that chain. You know the path where your envelope, where your messages exist. It's passed by it's like block, and then transmissions, and then your chain ID. So you know how to ask for that path within it. The permission system only allows you in if you prove that you're a valid member of that chain that's asking for it. Then you get a tree back that has been pruned. So it's the block, but it's had everything but your messages clipped off it. You then take that, you grab the latest block that you have for your chain, you look up the channel where these messages should be received into. On that channel, there is a field called tip, which holds the hash of the last pulse that you ingested from this foreign chain. In the message you just got from this foreign chain, there is a field called precedent, which references the hash of the previous pulse that this one is the next in line from. And so you check that the tip that you're holding matches the precedent that was set in the message. And then if it does, you replace the current tip with this new hash or CID in IPLD terms. After you've, like, once you walked the hash, once you walked the DAG, you also check that it matched the protocol format, like the counters restart from the right place. It's well formed, so it passes validation. The shared view of what promises are outstanding is matches and all that. Once it passes those integrity checks or correctness checks, then this pool object is a new DAG built on the current block, the current pulse that you have for yourself, but it's modified to include this new attached precedent, new attached tip. And that's it. So I just simply ask for things by CID, and I can walk the graph to get all the things I want. I get it all in. I check it's of valid format. I check it's valid in a protocol sense based on the precedent that I last got. And then if all that passes, I'm like, yeah, this is now attached to the soft. I just call it the soft block, where it's like, it's gonna be the next block. So instead of having a pool, it's like I can already begin making the next block by attaching all these other DAGs to their correct channel mount points. Yeah, because it's got a CID, so it's got a hash already. So I store it in IPFS, so that even if my system crashes. What? I don't understand that. So. Hey, I got a call I gotta take. Can I just get back to you in a minute? Thanks. Sure. ST. Okay. All right. Well, do you want to send me what? Do you want to take a photo of your signature?